Hey everyone, so in this video, I'm going to be going over some community content film and the focus will be on special weapons. So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more content and information. So this first weapon that we're going to be looking at is Zhai Fang's Guarding Meat Hook. Now this weapon typically has, I believe it's plus 30% attack, has a bit of AP on it, and then has the special when attacking a 100% chance to deal 500 bleed damage for 3 turns when the enemy's HP is more than 75%. This weapon was upgraded to have defense instead, a huge bonus to AP when attacking, and the most important part, pain spread, which is a special weapon trait that is limited to alert weapons for that 4th slot. So this 4th slot has a lot of different applications, but the one that we're going to be focusing on for this video is how it can actually spread bleed damage, and because bleed is able to stack unlike burn, you'll get to see how high bleed damage can actually go even in this S-Class era, where some toons have 10,000 HP, for example. The player who submitted this community content also has their Relito that has the pain spread ability. Now, I am curious to know if Relito's weapon had the increased bleed damage by 150 bleed, if that only occurs at the beginning of the match, or if it's an ability that occurs every turn. Because I know that Scopely addressed it that it wasn't working properly, the 150 bleed increase, because it should be adding 150 bleed to Relito's bleed of 600 if he's the leader of a team. But this pain spread ability is really effective in a match, and the only issue I have with it on Relito's weapon is that Relito can apply Impair when he attacks, so what prevents him from pain spreading the Impair instead of a bleed damage for a bleed team? To me, it seems as though pain spread can be really effective, but it can be really difficult to control, especially if you're trying to apply a lot of control to the enemy. So unless you're only applying one specific type of control, you could end up spreading a very weak debuff to an adjacent target, or a debuff that can actually be resisted by the target because of mods or other effects. Now, another very good weapon that this player runs is Pete's weapon with 50% HP. This weapon should actually be locked now that I'm taking a look at the top left corner. A huge bonus to AP when taking damage. They left a special at the beginning of each wave. All teammates gain plus 20% HP, and then for the 4th slot, they added alert buffs. So at the start of every turn, for every alert toon on your team, your teammates get plus 10% defense. So this compares really well with a very defensively minded attack team, one where you focus on outlasting the enemy or bleeding them to death or just applying some sort of damage that is indirect and doesn't correlate to a toon's actual attack or worries about a toon's defense. So we're going to slow down this video just so that you guys can see how this bleed stacks. So when Lacerator Davy attacks Pete, we see that the bleed doubles, and then there's also an increase in bleed because of a bleed mod. When Zhai Fang attacks, she applies bleed to Pete, doubles the bleed because of laceration, and pain spreads it over to Maggie. And now with Relito attacking Maggie, he's able to pain spread that bleed over onto Angel, and you'll see that that bleed damage is actually higher than what Maggie has, because it's adding the bleed that Maggie had before right to Angel's, because as I mentioned, bleed is able to stack, and this allows you to put very high bleed damage onto toons because of this stacking ability. In some ways, pain spread is similar to the Firestarter ability, except Firestarter can only spread a burn damage to an adjacent enemy, and obviously it doesn't stack. Because bleed stacks so well, it can make to be a very effective attack team, and I think it works really well against teams that are very tanky. I don't think that it would work well against teams that have heavy attackers on defense, just because they'd be able to potentially take out your offensive team, especially when you're running a team that has Generation 1 and 2 6-stars and only has 2 S-Class toons, one of them being a healer and the other one being a leader that doesn't give an attack bonus, an HP bonus, or a defense bonus. I think some ways that this attack team could be better is if there was a 100% heal reduction applied to the enemy, So there's a few different toons that you could use for that. S-Class Wangfa comes to mind because his active skill is 100% heal reduction up to 5 enemies on the second turn. You could also use Dale, but his active skill for 100% heal reduction and focus for your team is a turn 3 active skill. So unless you can get a toon that can rush on the second turn, but that would mean you'd have to have a commander as well who can apply that 100% heal reduction, then you're really stuck with either Wangfa or waiting an extra turn on Dale. But I think it's imperative to have 100% heal reduction because as we've seen, Pete was able to heal this team. Dr. Stevens has vitality, so he recovers some HP every turn based on how much AP he has. This Command Maggie, when she rushes, she can also heal the team. So just to make the match faster and shorter, you really need to have 100% heal reduction if you're not going to have more control. And if you have 100% heal reduction on everyone on the other team, then that also means the pain spread shouldn't be spreading that debuff because it's already applied to all the adjacent toons. Now, this attack team, I'm a little surprised that it works, but at the same time, we're focusing on how high this bleed damage can get just to prove that it is effective at taking down S-Class teams. I think this type of team would be really effective in Onslaught, for example, because you don't have to rush with it. The weapons work enough, and if you add on enough bleeding abilities, maybe add in a hemorrhage toon with a stun weapon, for example. So I think Moira is a hemorrhage toon. So she could apply hemo bleed to the enemy while we also have normal bleed applied. And that type of bleed, the hemo bleed, increases by 150 every turn. And then laceration can double both hemo bleed as well as normal bleed. So there would just be a little more application, I think. So instead of Rick, if we added Moira, because even having the 2 lacerators, I think would still be very effective, considering Rolito has a pain spread on his weapon, but he also has Impair, which I think makes him actually less effective on this team. And this is the match back at full speed, just to show you how long this team actually takes to work. Again, I think it only really works on tanky defense teams. Like, there's no real attackers in this defensive team. If there was a Krista, I think Rick would probably die. Pete is there, obviously, to bring them back. And because of Pete's weapon, we can see that there's that plus 40% defense bonus on the other toons, which is pretty helpful. Whenever Pete rushes, of course, he provides HP. He also provides Guardian Shields. So this team is based off of just surviving and trying to double that bleed, trying to spread that damage. It's a little unfortunate when the center toon dies because there's only so much you can spread damage to after that, or spread a debuff, I guess, because everything kind of runs through the center toon. You have 4 adjacent toons to the center toon, but then to a corner toon you have just 2, for example. Personally, I don't think that I would run a team like this just because it leaves a lot up to chance. You just really need to have 1 or 2 toons who can recover bleeds, so Mercer is a good example of that. And really, with Mercer as a lead, that's stun to the opponent. If any of these toons get stunned and there's really no control on the attacking team, like, this team could fall apart very quickly, but its application is really against really tanky defensive teams. I think it would be pretty effective against teams with the new Rosita or Payback Shiva, for example. We think of a Leopo lead or a Pete lead, and I think this type of team would be perfect at whittling it down. Now, it's not the fastest, but it is pretty effective, and it's pretty interesting to see how high that bleed damage is actually able to go. And when we take a look at the attacking team, there's a couple changes that I would personally make. Like Rick, I would remove him because I just don't find him to be as an effective lacerator as some of the other toons. I would want to put S-Class Sheila in this position, and I think she'd be really effective because you could realistically remove Pete from this team, because when Sheila rushes, she is able to revive a teammate, but she's also a lacerator. So I think she would be perfect for this team in so many ways. It would replace Rick, but also replace Pete at the same time. You would lose that defensive bonus and some of the bonus HP, but you could sub in a different toon. You could sub in, say, Wangfa, who would be able to apply that 100% heal reduction, or Dale, who's a commander and also has 100% heal reduction and focus for your team. I just think that there are other toons that could work in this team a little bit better and also apply a bit of control without losing the synergy that this player has obviously found. It's important to note that Pain Spread can obviously spread other debuffs. So in this example of this video, it shows that Pain Spread can move that stun onto an adjacent target, which can be helpful, but at the same time, if your goal is to bleed out the enemy, you want to be spreading the bleed and not these other abilities that you might be applying without you really thinking about how you're applying it. My example would again be Ralito's weapon. Now taking a quick look at Sheila, who would be my replacement for Rick as well as for Pete. She does have that reviving ability, as I mentioned. She also has all teammates regain up to 25% of their max HP. She's able to deal bleed damage on her rush as well. Her rush is only 66 AP, and of course she's a lacerator. It's almost like she was born for this type of team, and being a strong toon, she would get an AP bonus behind a lead like Ralito or Wangfa, and she's going to be more readily available now, I think, because the new event, the Survivorthon, has her as an S-class actually as part of the rewards, so you do have an opportunity to pick her up, and she comes straight as an S-class, which is so much less work than the other S-class characters where you need 2,000 items for the first 5-star, another 2,000 for the second 5-star, and then you need an additional 6,000 of the same items plus those other 2 5-stars maxed out as 6 stars, tier 4, level 90. Also, as a green toon, you can give her a stun on attack weapon, or you could do something interesting like another bleed weapon, because again, you don't want to accidentally pain spread stun. Well, pain spreading stun isn't a bad idea because it would give you more control, but it won't help you bleed out the enemy as fast as a bleed weapon would. Again, you give up a bit of control, but against some tanky teams, you're able to give up that control for the mass amount of bleed damage that you're able to stack on the opponent. Sheila's active skill falls a little short compared to the rest of her in my opinion, so it would not be one of the first things that I level up, especially if I'm trying to make an auto attack team, an auto bleed attack team at that. Big shout out to Chris for all the community content that he was able to provide me with, and thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video.